How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another episode of the Barely There podcast. Hopefully, you guys missed us. If you didn't, too bad. We're back. I say we're back, Lucas. Oh, we're back. Sorry, I had to get that out. I've been really
hard to be excited about this team.
Yeah, it's hard to be excited, but I'm always excited to talk some ball. It's been a minute. As Lucky Spag always says at the top of the show, smash the like button and bear the fuck down. Love that optimism. Love the F word in the middle there. I really want to drive the point home. Be sure to follow the podcast at Barely There Pod on Twitter. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. If you want to join the conversation, also jump on YouTube so we can actually see your comments. If you subscribe over there, it's a big deal. If you're listening on a podcast form, you are in for a good episode. I know it's been, like I said, it's been what, 2 weeks since we've been on here, Lucas, because we had the bye week. You know what? I mean, me and Lucas talked about it last Tuesday, just kind of getting an idea of how we were feeling about that Bears-Packer game, because obviously it was a tough one to swallow, especially in the season that we're in right now. You know, that loss is that much worse because that was kind of a win that we really fucking wanted, because that's the one thing we could look forward to in this season. And me and Lucas kind of came to agreement. It's like, listen, why don't we just take a week off? Why don't we take a little bit of time to kind of take a step back, stop living in the moment of the team, and be able to kind of look at what this team is right now and the direction that we're heading. And that's kind of what we're going to jump on in this podcast. So if you're expecting a full breakdown of the Bears-Packer game, or a full preview of the Bears-Eagles game, I'm sorry, you might be a little disappointed, but I feel like if you kind of like looking at the long-term aspects of this team, if you kind of like looking at some of the issues and some of the positives and negatives of this team right now, stick around. This is going to be a good listen. But anyway, now that I've gotten that out of the way, Lucas, I would say how's it going, but I already know how's it going. So what's on the menu today, Lucas?
I mean, yeah, if they want a summary of the Bears game in short, Randall Cobb caught a couple daggers, not as bad as before, and Christian Watson hung dong all over Soldier Field. The Bears are a very bad team, and I think we knew that, especially with Kyler Gordon being injured, Jaquan Brisker. It was an uphill trend, and it's good to see Justin Fields look better and better. I think he had, what was his yardage on the game? I think he had his most yardage in any game last week, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, you know, it's hard to look at this team in the here and now and be like, oh yeah, let's break this thing down. They're fucking bad, right? A lot of the guys that are on the Chicago Bears right now probably will not be there next year. We already saw about damn near 80% roster turnover, and a lot of these guys are on 1-year deals. And we could definitely dedicate an episode and explore who we think they're going to keep and some new blood that they're going to come in. But I think at the end of the day, we've finally gotten to the point, and this is from two guys that never really talk about tanking or losing games or voluntary. Like I've said it on record many times, like wanting to lose games is for losers, you know, and you're at the point now though, where you're mathematically eliminated and there's really zero benefit of winning another game. Do the tank correctly, right? You have Denver ahead of us right now. The Bears are the 3rd overall pick. Denver's the 2nd overall. Seattle through Denver is the 2nd overall pick. You're kind of hoping Denver's trying to play a little bit of spoiler. It's backup versus backup, so maybe they can beat the Cardinals and get an extra win. So the Bears move into that 2 slot, which would be extremely fucking valuable. But I mean, you got the Eagles and Bills who are probably going to beat the fuck out of the Bears. Not probably. They're going to beat the fuck out of the Bears. 2 offenses that can score at a very high capacity against a defense that can't stop a goddamn thing. Excuse me. And yeah, it's like, just try to get that 2nd overall spot at this point, right? Like, just you're supposed to lose the next 4 games. You have the Eagles, Bills, Vikings, and Lions. Not in that order, I don't think, but either way, just fucking take your beatings and try to get that 2nd overall slot, because I mean, you got to think winning 1 game right now could move the Bears into like 10th overall. And I mean, just look at the difference between 1 and 2. Like the Jets had Adam Gase, who was going to be there to play spite and try to win 1 more game. And who did they get? Right. Or no, that was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he won 1 game and got out of the 1st overall pick, I believe. The year Joe Burrow was drafted, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just kind of like, there's a lot of value now here with these first 5 picks. So just fucking As much as I hate saying it, just fucking lose.
Well, I mean, if we're being totally honest, I don't think if we tried, we could win these last 3 games because Philly is just an absolute wagon. Buffalo is very obviously an absolute wagon. And Detroit is one of the hottest teams in football. And I can't believe I could ever fucking say that. So,
hey, for a guy who loved fucking Dan Campbell, I don't hate to see the Lions trying to get out of the gutter. Like,
how can you? How can you? If honestly, dude, if you're a Bears or
where's our
Packers
Lions fan
fan,
that usually pops in?
I don't know. If you're a Bears or Packers fan this season, with the way your season has gone, and listen, there's that small percentage of Packer fans that are just thinking that they're going to run the fucking table because they beat the Bears. I hate to break it to you, but your heart's going to break this week. Like, it's going to be over. I'm sorry. But like, I don't understand how a Bear or Packer fan can look at what Detroit's doing this year and be like, man, fuck those guys. Because like, there is no team and no city, especially on the football side of things, that needs this season more than Detroit. And honestly, like, I would much rather have Detroit be that team that we kind of battle with than Minnesota. Like, Minnesota is just, I don't know what it is about them. I fucking can't stand them. They've had a lot of good players in their history, but I mean, Kirk Cousins, very unlikable.
It's weird too because I loved Randy Moss.
That what's that?
No, it's weird because I feel the same way. Like, they're not on the Packers level, and like I don't like them probably because they have more success than the Bears in recent history, or my lifetime. But I like loved Randy Moss. I think Justin Jefferson's like fucking the best receiver in the game, and I loved AP too. So it's like from the only team I truly hate in this division is the Packers.
Well, I mean, but even with that though, because like I had my guys in the Vikings too. Like, honestly, growing up, like Dante Culpepper, like when he was fucking slinging it, was awesome to watch. You know what I mean? Randy Moss, obviously. You know, I always liked it. I always liked watching Marcus Robinson in Chicago, so it was kind of cool seeing him go to Minnesota as well. Like, I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, I fucking hate Minnesota, but at the same time, like, I can recognize players in those teams. That's like the Packers. Like, I fucking hate the Green Bay Packers, but it's hard to hate a guy like Amon Green, for example. Like, I thought he was just a running back who played it fucking the right way. You know, there's a lot of different players like that, or even Nick Collins, a guy who just absolutely terrorized the Bears, but he was like just such an awesome rangy free safety. Like, I mean, like, it's just one of those situations where there's some likable guys in Detroit right now, and Dan Campbell's a very likable one. You know, I don't think I'd care where Dan Campbell was a coach at. I feel like I'd be all over it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the Mike Vrabel effect, where like this guy would absolutely go toss some shoulder pads on and go to fucking war with these guys if he could. But obviously he can't. We're no longer in the days of the coach player George Halas mold, unfortunately. But like, those are the guys you're always going to root for, and that's the guy that I'm always going to root for because it's hard not to.
Even someone like Jamal Williams, I know he got a lot of shit for like crying or whatever to the team and whatever, but I don't know. I always admire that kind of stuff when people are moved to their emotions because you know what it's like being on a team, dude. Sometimes you just care so fucking much and you feel helpless, and it's like you're trying to get the guys around you to you know, to just get shit together, get the team on par. I think he's a great captain. I think he's a top 3 personality in the entire NFL. Like, he's fucking hilarious, dude. I've never seen an interview I don't like from him. So I hate every player that has ever played for Green Bay except for the punky QB. Thanks, Bags. We appreciate it. But yeah, no, it's just kind of one of those things. It's also one of those things like when I saw the Browns kind of get out of the gutter and the Bengals, like the Bears have, if you don't want to admit it, they've been in the fucking gutter. Like, they have that one-off 12-4 season, and then they're a pretty shitty team on both ends of before and after that 12-4 season. So it's like, dude, we need to get out of the fucking gutter. And that's something we're going to talk about today with Ryan Poles and kind of how he needs to knock this offseason out of the park in order to get the Bears out of the gutter because, you know, we've said it on other episodes before, but this team, like, they expedited this rebuild to the point where you can no longer blame Ryan Pace in 2023 for Ryan Poles things. I didn't think you could fully I knew that Poles was limited this past offseason, definitely with cap restrictions and stuff like that, but I think he made it worse. And like I said, he expedited that rebuild by taking on all that dead cap. So it's like you just kind of expedited your timeline as well, right? Like, you're going to start to need to need to be showing results. You can't have another 3-win season next year or 5-win season next year. You have to be competing for a wild card with how much draft capital you have and how much off-season, what do you call it? Salary cap you have, right? And especially the fact that it looks like you have your quarterback position figured the fuck out, and he's still on his rookie deal, and you only got 3 years left of that, so can't waste another one of them, right? With 3 years with the 5th-year option. So it's just kind of one of those things. Like you can, if you've been a big Poles defender, which I hate taking a side on either side, I try to look at it objectively, and I just think he's done a bad job. But if you're a Poles defender, like a lot of fucking strides need to be made next offseason. Otherwise it can get really ugly in Chicago quickly. We've seen it go south before. We've seen a 2-year hire with Phil Emery. So
yeah, no, there's going to be absolutely no excuse, Lucas. I kind of brought up a lot of those points in the pregame or before we kind of hopped on, but like there's just such little room for error heading into 2023. Like if people want to defend Ryan Poles, that's fine. Maybe we have been a little bit harsh in a lot of ways, mainly because he's traded players that we liked. Maybe he didn't trade players at the times we thought we should trade them. I don't want to like cry over spilled milk with that, because that shit's happened, and every GM I feel like that's ever existed of one of my favorite teams has done something I don't like. So like that's fine. But we've broken down this team to the point where there is going to be absolutely zero fucking excuse for Ryan Poles if he does not knock this offseason out of the park. Like, I'm not saying like he has to make a trade for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. I think that type of thing would be awesome. And I think that's something that we need to start kind of pumping our chest for. Like, if we can ever make our voices heard as fans, that might be one of them to kind of get her going. I mean, shit, dude, we had people setting up charities for fucking Deshaun Watson because we wanted to trade for him so bad. Like, Bears fans, if we want to do some crazy shit, go try to get DeAndre Hopkins. But like, even if we don't end up doing that, like, to be in the conversation, to say like, okay, so Jacksonville got fucking DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but like, just an example. But the Bears were right there. You know what I mean? Like, those are the types of things I need to fucking hear. I need us to nail some free agents, man. I want it to hit the point where like we have so much money to spend, like we need to go fucking spend it. Even if it's not something that we think can necessarily be a knock it out of the park type signing, like I need us to be aggressive. Aggression needs to be the key for Ryan Poles, because there was just none this past offseason. Like, it was just a complete teardown, and like, that's fine. I feel like a lot of us kind of went through training camp with the right expectation that like, okay, he's tearing this fucking thing down. You know what I mean? Like, he just needs to see if Justin Fields is the guy. Now we know Justin Fields is the guy. Like, there's no question about that. And if you have a question about that, you're probably fucking Dave Portnoy, and I can't help you with that, Dave. But there's no question anymore that Justin Fields is the fucking guy. So you need to build. It's time to fucking build. Like, you look at what's happening with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. I just brought up Jacksonville a second ago. You look at what's happening with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. They had money, and even overpaying guys, they fucking decided we're going to go all in for our offense because we think we have the quarterback of the future. And now it's starting to look like they do. Trevor Lawrence over the past few weeks has looked like that number 1 overall pick. I'm not going to say necessarily that he will have a better career than Justin Fields, but he's going to have a damn good career. And I've thought that from the start. The Bears need to have that type of aggression with building around Justin Fields. They need to go spend that fucking money. This is not a situation where we need to just keep saving it in the well for next year or next year or next year. Ryan Poles got hired to be a GM in the NFL. He needs to be able to manipulate the cap to his advantage. He needs to be able to draft insanely well because he got some draft picks. He got some draft capital, and we need to start seeing strides. Chase Claypool needs to pan out, because that's something that we traded a second fucking round pick, a high second round pick for Chase Claypool. That needs to pan out. And if you had the idea that you were going to tank this season, like if that was something that was on Ryan Poles' agenda, you traded that second round pick knowing it was going to be a high second round pick. So that needs to pan out. And if he doesn't end up getting a second contract with the Bears, that's going to be a monumental failure. So like this is where like the Poles defenders, we've given you fucking time. That's fine. We're going to let this play out. I'm going to go into fucking 2023 off season with an open mind, thinking, hey, maybe Ryan Poles is going to do something here. A lot of money to spend. So I'm going to sit. I'm going to be patient about that. But I'm just gonna let you guys all know now, and I think I speak for Lucas when I say this as well. We're not going to be fucking patient once we get to fucking July and we start seeing this team. And if this team isn't something that like looks like something that could be a competitive team, or we're signing guys who could maybe pop off, like the ticker is going to start ticking. You know, I'm glad you brought up Phil Emery, Lucas. I thought that was a really good point because we all thought the first year of Phil Emery was like, okay, this guy's just building this team. You know what I mean? And then you see in the second year, it's like, oh, no, he's fucking sinking us fast. We need to fucking jump off the ship.
Yeah,
so,
no.
Like, Ryan Poles, it's time, man. Like, this offseason is huge. There is no excuse anymore that you don't know what Justin Fields is. Go build around him. And by the way, make sure our defense doesn't fall apart at the same time, because you do have the money to go get some guys, and you do have the draft capital to keep that defense respectable at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, so for those of you after hearing Duke, he's a Sox fan, so the money shit and not spending it, that gets to him pretty bad. But at the end of the day, he's right in the fact, and I think it kind of, I think I made a pretty good point calling back to the fact that this thing was expedited. Like, if you would have slowly taken away a piece at a time, couple pieces this offseason, couple pieces next offseason, spread out the dead cap, tried to stay competitive and it didn't work out, and now you got a fresh bill, it's like you get a couple years, right? You pretty much took all of that dead cap, and any other dead cap is going to be inflicted by you yourself. Like, there's a small number, but in terms of spending, they're going to have to spend a certain amount to get to the cap floor. We don't know what the cap floor is yet. You would also think the salary cap raises. So I would imagine adding about $10 million. And I actually wouldn't be opposed to them rolling over, right? Like getting to the cap, because they're going to have to spend so much to get to the cap floor. That I think rolling over a little wouldn't be horrible. Because I do think, like, while I admire Jacksonville's aggressiveness to build around Trevor Lawrence, I do think that they put themselves in a pretty rough spot, like in terms of next year's salary cap and stuff like that. So I'm okay with the sustainable success, but I think the immediate and like abrupt teardown and just like, hey, we're not going to be competitive this year, kind of expedites the timeline. When it comes to Claypool, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think it's Robert K. Schmitz. He's a pretty popular Bears follow, and honestly has some fucking banger tweets. Like, I'm going to give him his credit, but he put out a tweet saying something about how, like, oh, if Claypool is only here for a year and he doesn't get extended, like, it would still be fun to watch him and he's going to aid Justin Fields' development. It's like, no. You have fun with your 7th round pick, like N'Keal Harry, right? Like, it is not fun to trade the 35th overall pick. That's fucking abrasive. Like, he needs to deliver. And I think it's an unfair pressure on Chase Claypool, honestly, because you know how fans are. They're going to put that kind of association with him, and the fact that the Bears gave up a lot, and they're going to expect him to perform like a number one. And I don't think he's a number one caliber receiver. That's why I think entertaining an idea like a DeAndre Hopkins, if he does hit the market, or one of these veterans that have to get churned over because of salary cap. I mean, you look at Cooper last year. That was some guy I was pounding the table for, because I'm like, dude, just take on the money. Like, it's totally okay. He went for a 4th or 5th rounder. And you think about the Bears' 4th or 5th round pick, it's going to be at the top of that. So you got to think they're going to get priority over a lot of teams, right? Cleveland wasn't one of those top picks. So I do think they're in a good position to make strides this offseason, but it's all about execution. And is he going to execute, right? Like, you need to see like 4 or 5 signings that are Ogunjobi level signings, right? Like $13 million a year. I don't care if, you don't, I would like to see you break the bank on one franchise altering, like all pro proven talent, right? I haven't looked over the free agent pool. But if you're not putting out a groundbreaking contract, like you better have like a couple 3-4 year deals for guys like Larry Ogunjobi. That's going to be 13 to 15 million. That's far above the market, or that's far above the market average for an average starter at that position. Cause you need impact players. Like, you have a couple, but you have nowhere near. And that's my biggest qualm with, the excitement for letting good players go, right? Like, a Khalil Mack is not as easy to replace in theory as it is with what's it called. Yeah, sure, you can maybe pick up Will Anderson with the 3rd overall pick. That's if Seattle decides, if Denver doesn't win and Seattle decides they don't go for him because they like Geno Smith. Like, there's so much that's involved with it that it's like that pick right there should be traded back, right? So I think it's it's something. Yeah, if Odell's healthy, yes. At this point, and I'm not even a huge Odell guy, but I think he makes enough of a difference where people are worried about his knee and you overpay him and he's still on the market. Sure, I think he wants to go to a contender, and I don't think anyone views the Bears as a contender next year because, like Duke said, they have to knock it out of the fucking park. Like what seems like one of your biggest assets and your second round pick already looks like you fucked it up, right? Like if he doesn't give you at least Claypool doesn't give you at least T Higgins type production and earn himself 15 to $18 million a year contract, that's a fucking failure. There's no other way to cut it. So, it's concerning. It makes you, I understand the optimism and why you would be excited, but that shit can go south so quick, man. And they have to hit on so many of these moves.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the tough part about the Claypool trade is it's so hard to get intel on a guy that you're looking at mid-season from a team that's been kind of trying to look to move on from him anyway. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to get intel of like, hey, is Chase like is he a dog in camp? You know what I mean? Like is he a guy that goes hard at practice? Are these like character things overblown, like all that stuff? And I don't want to like jump here and like act like that because I think a lot of that is BS. But I think when you make that trade with that high of a second round pick, like you need to be able to have your intel right. Like you need to know what Chase Claypool is bringing to the table. You need to have like a lot of very tight insight on that. And I feel like that would have been hard to get. You know what I mean? Because it's not like the Steelers are going to be like, oh yeah, this guy's a head case. You know what I mean? Like we'll trade immediately. It's like no, they're going to play the gamesmanship here. They're going to say all the right things. They're going to sell you to the fucking moon, kind of similar to a car salesman who's trying to sell you a car without a gas can. You know what I mean? Like they're going to tell you everything that's great about it. It's like, oh yeah, no, it just doesn't take gas. And when you drive down the road, fire sets. So that's one thing that I think that kind of bothers me about that trade. And that's not per se that I dislike the Claypool trade, like as far as the player that we got. It's just like when you look at that second rounder, and like I thought you brought up a pretty good point here with when he got traded and what that fucking value is in the second round. Like that value during the draft is a lot higher. You know what I mean? And if we're in a situation where we are seriously thinking about trading back because we don't want one of the top defensive players in this draft, which I think there's a lot of different scenarios we can go about that I'd be pretty happy with, and that being one of them. If we were to get a guy like Daron Payne through free agency or potentially even trade for a guy like Jonathan Allen, if Washington decides they want to keep Daron Payne and they need to move a contract, I think we need to pay a lot of attention to that Washington situation because there's two very good defensive tackles that could be either moved or available. You know what I mean? So I think you look at that on draft day, man, and you offer 2 second round picks to kind of move up into the like bottom of the third round, or like, that kind of that bottom tier, the third or first round. Like there's going to be teams that are going to take that call. You know what I mean? They're going to think about it, especially with teams that maybe didn't hit on a trade up, teams that don't necessarily love who's available at the position because they see the players that are on their own roster. Like maybe they're not getting the calls they think they were going to get because they were going to sit until draft day to do it. Like that, the value of that pick is going to come up more and more the more Chase Claypool doesn't produce, and like I'm going to give this year a wash because I feel like there's just a lot going on at Hallis Hall right now. I feel like there's a lot of turmoil. I feel like there's a lot of people who, I thought you brought up a good point at the beginning of the show. Like there's a lot of people who don't know if they're going to be here next year. So I feel like they probably are having difficulty buying in at this point. Whereas you have the guys like Jaquan Brisker, Kyler Gordon.
Yeah.
Like those are the guys that'll for sure be here, but it's everybody else, you know what I mean? And it can be kind of daunting coming in as a rookie and then coming in for your second year and not really recognizing a lot of people that are going to be around you, but that is the nature of the NFL. But yeah, dude, I just without beating it. What's up?
No, I wanted to add something to the draft process part, but you could finish your thought.
I was just going to say, without beating a dead horse, like I just really think this is an opportunity. Like they went the road we didn't want them to go, Lucas. You know what I mean? There's no denying that. Like we weren't necessarily keen on the idea of Ryan Poles completely tearing it down, especially trading guys like Roquan Smith, Robert Quinn when he did, Khalil Mack when he did. Like I don't want to beat that dead horse. All I want to say is like he has every opportunity to turn me into a believer. like every fucking opportunity in the world. Like if he knocks it out of the park and we're fucking vying for a playoff spot next year, like this is me going on record to say like I fucking love you, Ryan Poles. Like I'm wrong. I was 100% wrong about your process. Like I trust you now, but like I need to see it before I'm gonna fucking jump on the wagon. You know what I mean? Because I'm not gonna be this guy on Twitter that fucking defends Ryan Poles to the absolute death because I think he might be onto something. I don't know if he is on something or not, so I'm not going to sit here and just pretend like he's the greatest fucking thing since sliced bread.
Well, and another thing too about free agency, people don't realize that capital is more important than salary cap, because look at all of the major, like all the game changing players that left their current team. How many of them were to free agency? Like anytime you get I hate to say it, a Roquan Smith type, a Khalil Mack type, like it's very rare they get to free agency cleanly without, a couple years of franchise tags, something like that, right? Like it's very rare they actually make it through the gauntlet to be just an unrestricted free agent. You'll get some good players for sure that make it there. Never like those franchise altering players. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson, AJ Brown. All of them were dealt via trade. They don't make it to free agency because a team has to be stupid to let them get to free agency without trading them, right? Like they just have to be. And I'm not going to put Roquan Smith on that exact level as like a Devontae Adams or anything, because there is some truth to the premium position shit. But yeah, like I still think we lost out. Like you should have gotten a first round pick for Roquan Smith, in my opinion. Whether it was from one of these teams that were competing for a Super Bowl, like a Chiefs or something like that, right? Like a late, like a 30 overall, I would have been okay with. End of the second round pick was not a good enough. Like if we're just evaluating some of the moves from this year. Then in terms of the draft, like you have to trade down because you traded that second pick. You cannot go from getting the number 2 overall pick and grabbing Will Anderson unless you truly believe he's the next fucking Von Miller, or like unless you truly believe Jalen Carter is the next Aaron Donald, right? Like these are the comparisons we're hearing. You want them to trade down, right? And you want Seattle, in all honesty, to pick Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. Like you want them, and that's totally a fucking Pete Carroll move. Like he would for sure be like, yeah, no, we'll roll with Geno. Let's go get an edge rusher, right? Like I could see that happening. So the reality is the value comes from quarterbacks. Like that's where it truly comes from. You're not going to trade as good of a prospect as Myles Garrett was. You're not trading 3 first round picks in order to go get Myles Garrett. You'll do that for a quarterback. So if Bryce Young, as we also is being mocked right now, goes 1 and Will Anderson goes 2, now that number 3 spot is literally the most valuable spot on the board because of CJ Stroud. I swear to God, as a Bears fan, I'm not telling you to hype up Will Levis, but definitely do not sit there and shit on him all over Twitter, because these social media teams look at that kind of stuff. Like if the Seahawks were to trade out and have someone take Stroud or something like that were to happen, like you want Levis's stock to be as high as possible, or Hooker's stock to be as high as possible. Like gas up all of these motherfucking quarterbacks, because that's where the value is going to come from. We're not talking about, oh, we can get move down 3 spots and get a second rounder. Like you're talking about what did the San Francisco 49ers give to move up like 10 spots? 3 first round picks. Like that's a difference maker. So you have a piece of gold right now. You have to hope things kind of fall. You need a little bit of luck too, but I think you have to trade down. Like the Bears are not in a position where they take one guy and they're good. I guess the Browns weren't either, right? But I don't know. It's just kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of the draft strategy has to come in when we see what free agents, like how free agency kind of plays out. Like I think getting a good, like if I think getting a Deron Payne or a Jonathan Allen, or there's a couple names out there as well that I feel like could be but like if you get one of those guys, your draft strategy like significantly changes to the point where you can't even think about drafting at that pick. You know what I mean? Like I think Anderson from Alabama, I do think he is a dog. I think there is definitely something there, but I think he's being hyped up a little bit in a draft that doesn't necessarily is super prone on edge rushers, I guess. I think Jalen Carter is a little bit more of an impressive resume. I think he's a guy who's been dominant for a while, and I think he's a guy who while it might take him a little bit to turn it on, he can fucking turn it on. I think that would be, if the Bears stuck at that pick, that would kind of be the appeal right there. But I do agree with your point that we're not one player away. That's why I think free agency and the trade market is going to dictate how that draft process works out, because if we do go hard in free agency, if we do go get that number one wide receiver, it doesn't even have to be a DeAndre Hopkins, but if we do make a fucking splash, like, then you can afford to sit at that pick and draft. You know what I mean? Or you can afford to trade back, but only trade back to get like to 5, you know what I mean? Or even just a little lower than that to go get a fucking immediate impact player, you know what I mean? Because there is something there if you're able to build around what we have right now, because we have a quarterback, we have a pretty good tight end, we have a really good running back room. We have some pieces on the offensive line, not enough. Hopefully we address that in free agency, because I think there are going to be some interesting people out there. We do have some we are like one wide receiver away. So if we were to address that with a number one, like that's definitely something that can get a little bit of juice on offense. Defense, like fucking hell, dude, you could throw it at a dartboard of anywhere, not the secondary, and it would show something that needs to be replaced. Like obviously my boy Jack Sanborn is a guy that I feel like we can fucking build around, but building around that is going to require some fucking change, or it's going to require some draft capital to kind of get some linebackers in that room next to him. And we also are, for the first time, as far as I can remember, I guess unless you want to consider Leonard Floyd not one of them, we really don't have a lethal pass rusher right now. You know what I mean? Like Travis Gibson is a guy that I was always really high on, but he's a guy that obviously needs somebody else on the opposite side of him to be able to produce. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the fucking reality of it. And we have just absolutely nothing up front as far as the interior. You know what I mean? So that's why, like, we've really driven the point home throughout this podcast that we really need to get this money spent. We need to go make some fucking moves. We need to be aggressive, because that changes your draft strategy. Like if we go into the draft and we haven't addressed a lot, Lucas, then we would be insane to sit and draft that pick. Like we have to trade that pick away. You know what I mean? We have to take any draft capital that we can, because it's very obvious at that point that Poles is going to look to pick guys up in the draft. And hopefully, if he's not spending that money in free agency, he starts getting fucking real fancy with the extensions. You know what I mean? With the guys who fucking deserve them. But I mean, unless
there's a fucking issue with that too, because it's like, you know, I wouldn't hate seeing a Komet extension or Jalen Johnson. We'll see, right? Like,
yeah, Jalen's kind of up in the air right now, man.
Yeah,
like,
Jalen Johnson, we'll see. But like Mooney, Komet getting extended, and Monty, that's cool. But like, you didn't get any better by doing that.
No.
So people forget about that aspect too, and like how many roster spots actually need to be filled, and how much the second overall or the third overall pick actually costs to pay. Like he's getting paid a true, pretty good. He's getting paid above that average salary for a veteran starter at his position, right? The number 3 overall pick that's another thing too. Like, man, you could fucking tell me that we fill every single hole in this draft, and I would still say trade down, just because I can't see the Bears go pick at number 3 and then not pick till like 57. Like I'll freak the fuck out. I'm not gonna lie.
So I'm gonna address
somehow the fucking Ravens keep winning with. Yeah, that's a good point by Matt.
So I kind of want to jump on this, because I've gone back and forth with this coaching staff quite a bit. I like Matt Eberflus, but I think there's things that he needs to fix down the fucking stretch, especially with game management. Why it's so hard? Yeah, because I don't even want to single out Alan Williams personally, because I feel like he's look at the roster he's working with right now. Like I'm always a big proponent in making chicken salad out of chicken shit, but goddamn, you know what I mean? Like it's really fucking hard to get much out of this defense right now. And in all honesty, with this defense, like with almost our entire starting secondary out, like Aaron Rodgers didn't like fucking go nuts on us. You know what I mean? Like we've had moments during this season where the defense has kind of stepped up, even without a lot of talent in. I'm not saying it's been consistent, and it doesn't reflect on the scoreboard at the end of the game, because you do have those points where the game kind of falls out of reach and, you know, they're scoring. But I do have to give credit that there has been kind of bounce backs on both sides of the football. Even if we're going to talk about everybody's favorite offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy, who I even went on this podcast and on Twitter to say that I feel like he's trying to kill Justin Fields and he might actually be a double agent. He's also had times where he has looked pretty damn good. It's so hard because when you look at this fucking entire coaching staff, it's full of like first time this, first time that. Alan Williams, first time defense coordinator. Fucking Luke Getsy, first time offensive coordinator, play caller. Matt Eberflus, first time head coach. So like on that side of things, it's very, very hard to kind of really decide if it's good or not. Like, I don't know if I was ever really in on Alan Williams as defense coordinator because I guess I didn't really know what Alan Williams brought to the table. And it's kind of hard to tell what he brings to the table because every significant defensive player that we had essentially outside of our secondary was traded or moved or, released before the season even started. You know what I mean? So it's hard to judge that. And with Matt Eberflus, he showed times like with challenges where he's been on the ball. He's shown times where he hasn't focused on one side or the other on football, and football decisions have looked better because of it. He's also had times where it seems like he's focused a little bit more on the defense, and the offense, kind of hurts because of it. Like there's a lot of different ways, and this is something I'm going to go into way more in detail once we hit the off season. But I guess to answer your question, Matt, I'm not in or out on anybody at this point. Like it's hard to grade, man. They were not given a legitimate roster. Like Ryan Poles, and I'm not saying this as a flack on Ryan Poles. I'm just saying this is what happened. Ryan Poles tore down the roster. It's hard to say that any coaching staff could have got a whole lot more out of what they were given. You know what I mean?
And to be honest, I think like as crazy as it sounds at this point, maybe through the first 5 weeks, Alan Williams had more to work with, but definitely for the back half of this season, Getsy's had a lot more to work with than Alan Williams. So I think you got to give everyone a mulligan. I can't say I was an Alan Williams guy just haven't seen a ton of adjustment in general, right? Like, not until recently have they started just like sending blitz packages, and the blitzes still aren't getting there because they don't have fucking linebackers that can blitz either. But, it's like it took a long time to see any form of adjustment, which was worrisome. But like I said, dude, it's a mulligan in general. I personally don't like the cover 2 fucking 4-3 front Tampa 2 defense that Matt Eberflus comes from at this point. I think it's a little bit outdated. I think it could be ran well for sure. But I think you need to be a little bit more multiple, and I'm hoping they kind of move into that direction next year defensively. I just, especially if you're going to accommodate a guy like Will Levis, you're going to want him in all different spots. Or not Will, I'm sorry, Will Anderson. But you're going to want him in all different spots. So I don't know.
I guess like to that point, I think, and it was kind of hard to gauge with like a Lovie Smith, but like it's so hard to run a good Tampa 2 in the NFL when you don't have a pass rush. Like that is the key of the Tampa 2, because you have guys who are supposed to be in a certain place at a certain time, and a good pass rush forces a quarterback to throw the football. So when you have a corner or a safety or a linebacker already going to where they're like assigned to go, and you have pressure on the quarterback to just kind of be throwing it where he thinks his receiver is going to be, you have a way better opportunity to jump routes in that situation. And I think that's what made Lovey's defense click for so long. And that's honestly why I feel like a lot of people run the nickel defense now kind of as a base defense, that, and, with how often people pass the football. So like, I guess I don't necessarily agree with that assessment of the cover 2, but I think with where we're at as a roster, like when we have no pass rush, it's impossible to run. Like it's impossible to run effectively, because if you don't have that pressure on the quarterback, any quarterback knows how to beat zone defense. And that goes zone defense across the board. And there's a lot of defense that run a lot of zone defense these days. It's hard to beat if you don't have a pass rush. You know what I mean? I think Baltimore does a pretty good job of it, where they don't necessarily have to man up all the time, and they're able to have some corners play over the top and cover 3 because they have such a good front. They're able to get to the quarterback and force mistakes. And that's where you kind of have your guys like, even like I guess Kyle Fuller would probably be my favorite example of it, because I thought he played pretty well in that.
Yeah, I like Vic's defense the most. But he ran everything. But yeah, I just prefer. I think it's a little bit more it gives you the ability to attack more and really apply a lot more pressure versus like having hogs up front to win. I think you're able to simulate more. You're able to disguise more. So that's why I just think it's better for the modern NFL. But then again, like we saw fucking Eberflus produce the top defense in the NFL with this scheme. So I'm not saying it's like it's just not my preference, right? And they need to get the horses in order to run it right.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of what it is, because I think there's a place for both the 3-4 and 4-3 schematically defense in the NFL still. I think I love the 3-4 defense. I always have, and I was a big proponent of the Bears finally switching to the 3-4 defense because I feel like we tried carrying something over from the Lovey area, but we didn't have the guy that ran it, so it didn't fucking matter. And we didn't have a pass rush once we got rid of Julius Peppers anyway. But now I'm going into fucking ancient history if we want to go that far. But I think with a 3-4 defense, you make a good point. You're able to simulate pressure almost. You're able to do that better because you're going to have 3 guys up front as well as 2 linebackers on the outside. Even if you have one fucking blitzing and the other going back in coverage, you can manipulate that to where you have, like, say, Khalil Mack runs a pass rush on this one, and Leonard Floyd goes back in coverage. And then the very next play, Leonard Floyd goes on the pass rush, and Khalil Mack pops back and covers the flat. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of different things you can do with that, and there's a lot of different ways you can manipulate that to make a quarterback kind of be on the edge or maybe hold on to the ball a little bit longer because he's like, oh, Khalil Mack's not coming on this play. Wait a minute, where the fuck's Leonard Floyd? Pop. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. Plus, you have 3 guys, usually bigger guys, that can like really just cause a fucking fuss in the middle to where you don't have guards being able to go out and help tackles and fucking pass in pass pro. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different ways you can manipulate that. But like when you run a 4-3 and you're able to have that extra linebacker kind of be able to sit back in the middle of the field, and if you have like 2 or 3 good linebackers on the field at all times, like I said, that's a very turnover based type defense. Whereas like a 3-4 is very much like we're going to get to the quarterback and force ways that way. You know what I mean? And hope we have ball hawking guys in the back. I don't want to go on a full defensive rant here because I could talk about the 3-4 and 4-3 defense for days. I fucking love defense. Obviously, I'm a Bears fan. I'm that guy that everybody hates because he keeps loving defense and he wants to keep a defense on the field. But you know, I guess back to the entire original point of what kind of brought this all up is like, it's hard to say for sure what we can see out of this team and out of this scheme and out of these coaches until, like you said, Lucas, you fucking nailed it. We have the horses to run it. You know what I mean? And we don't. There are a lot of guys I like on the defense. There are a lot of guys I like on the offense. Does not mean that they're all going to be here next year. And it doesn't mean they're all going to be long-term pieces. Ryan Poles needs to give Matt Eberflus a shot, dude. He has to give this entire fucking team
here and stop smelling like shit is really what we're saying.
Yeah.
Little Axe body spray, and just like do your best to not have shit caked onto your nuts.
Yeah, just, try to avoid like melting peanut brittle in a microwave and rubbing it up your crotch, I guess is the best way I can put it, man. Don't just roll around in it for a few days and eat Dorito fucking sandwiches either. Yeah, but I guess that's the point where we're kind of rolling off the rails a little bit. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. We're going to try to be a little bit more. We're going to try to keep some segments up, but at the same time, like, this is a brutal run to the end of the season. We have the Eagles, the Bills, and fucking, as much as I hate to admit it, I'll still get up for the game against the Lions because, like, we should beat the Lions in, theory. But like, we're probably going to lose the Lions too, unfortunately. So yeah, just try to run with us a little bit here. We're going to try to have some fun. I'm going to call Lucas Jagoff. Lucas is going to call me fat, and the world's going to continue to move forward. But until next time, this has been the Barely There podcast. Unless Lucas has anything else.
Nah, man. Nah, I'm already kind of in off-season mode. I'll have a lot more next time we record about specific guys that I think they should target that might actually make it. Just be fucking better at your job, Ryan Poles. Maybe you are good at your job and I don't know. Maybe you have a grand plan, but just don't fuck it up next year, dude. Please.
Yeah.
I can't in the perpetual rebuild shit. Just can't.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I can't handle another rebuilding year. Like, it's heads will roll. You know what I mean? Like we can't do it again. But as Lucky Spag said at the top of the show, and as he will say at the end of the show, make sure to smash that like button on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. I saw a couple likes on Facebook as well. I appreciate the support out there. It's at Spotify, Apple, any podcasting app, man, we're on it. You know what I mean? Even if you're still like fucking attaching your headphones to an actual rock and you're listening to listening on Google Music, like we're there. I promise we're there. You know, I don't know if you're all there, but we're there. But yeah, be sure to subscribe, listen to us. I'm Duke Coughlin. You can follow me at that pod guy Duke. That's Lucas Perfetti. Be sure to follow him at Lucas Perfetti 46. We've been barely there, and bear down.
Bear down.